Hello, you all. Welcome to Friday night. And here we've got Jan's Les Paul Jr. 57 reissue Epiphone. And it's a nice, straightforward guitar. There's a couple of little things. One thing I've already done with this guitar, and that is I've boosted up the pickup on a couple of pickup surrounds. I couldn't find any that were the exact same fit, so these are a bit of a larger footprint. But it's actually not a problem really. It just brings the pickup up closer because it's quite a long way from the strings, so it seemed to be too far. Anyhow, so I've done that at home, had a bit of a play. There are some double notes up here. It really doesn't want to play very well, and we've got a plastic nut which is also pretty horrible, and it's causing pinging and so on and so forth. So we're going to fit an adjustable tusk nut in here. I'm going to set it up and level out the frets, and then we'll see. The weakest spot on this guitar unfortunately is the bridge, and you can see it's one of these cheap what they call them, pre-compensated. I mean, in principle they work fine, but the problem is they typically have too much play between this horn shaped thing here and the post, and it allows it to rock. And I'll give you those about to rock. We salute you. Let's take this scratch plate template off the wall there. So yeah, this is really weird that so they have the the top of the guitar there, and then they have that thing there, and then they have that there, so like so, and they have that there like that, and then you've got the unit that sits in there, and it's a bit sloppy, so there's too much room. So it kind of, there's the horns of the bridge, like so, and of course it goes around there, and over here is the bridge thing with its compensated bit. But the problem with this is that this unit, that movement there actually ends up with the bridge doing something unintended, and it's this. So the bridge ends up going like this. I'm exaggerating a little bit. Whoops, too much. Goes like that, and then it tilts that forward like that, and that forward like that. And the result is that the string comes over here, and before there was a tiny bit of break angle, but now there's almost none at that back bit there as it goes through. So it's a real shame, because these bridges end up not really working terribly well. And actually it's not the end of the world, but if you look, you can see it tilting there a little bit, and it's also complicated by the fact that the posts often start to pull out as well under the load. So you've got the whole arrangement plus the slop in the construction causing it to rotate forwards. All I can do for this particular situation is to try and find some spares, and I think I may have some spare posts in here. I'm not sure I got that much left anymore, but I've got two little drawers, if I can just get them out, full of bits there and here and there. So I'll bring them out and see if I can find a pair of these that happen to fit the bridge part better. Anyway, so fairly straightforward job. So what I'm going to do is get me a new one of these adjustable tusk nuts. Tip it out, throw the plastic away, and get me a base, adjustable nut base. Let's have, oh no, we want a tall one, don't we? Let's have a taller one. So, okay. So, well, normally often I tend to do this bit before I get down to working on something, but I'm gonna, I'll just keep you here while I do it. So just check out these two little things fit. Yes, they do. Now, of course, I won't be able to get it off without dialing out the grub screws. So in preparation for these, I tend to do a couple of things. First of all, I cut a little strip of brass to fit in there, and that gives the grub screws a little footing to stand on, which helps not to go through the plastic of the thing. I know what I mean. The plastic of the bass. So in this thing here, what I'm going to do, if I can find where I put it. How can you lose a critical tool? That is weird. Here it is, hiding behind the neck. Right, so I know that the strip thickness that I need is 2.75 mils. So I'll dial that in here, and I'll run my caliper along there just to give me a little line to work to. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but it usually isn't bad. And then just cut it correct length, bend it, and you'll find that that sticks in pretty well. About a millimetre too long. So what I'll do is just trim it very quickly, and then I'll just round off the ends. That should fit in there nicely. Now this is loose in there, so when you come, when you come to change the strings or do anything, then it's good to just remember that bit could fall out. Then what I do is put that over there, and then I dial the grub screws until they're just sticking out a little bit, the same amount on each side, because they have a slightly, I don't know what they call this, cone, no, it's just some sort of word they have for the profile of that end there, and it's not quite flat. But what I like to do is to get it, hold it flat, and scrape off the little flange shaped bit, whatever it is called, with the view of getting a flat base to the grub screws, and that also helps spread the load, I should say. And then I'll just sand it off a bit. That's all right. There you go, nice and flat. So that's the thingy prepped. And if we come back to here, we can place it neatly in there like so, and that's our unit ready to go, including the bit of that stuff I just mentioned, which was brass. So what I do next is I'm going to remove the nut from the guitar. This is one of the older Epiphones, and the newer ones had a much better arrangement in that the inspired by Gibson ones have, I think they use new bone, which isn't as good as Tusk in my book, but it's better than plastic. Having said that, I always change it out. So because I want to clear this out of the way, I'm going to take off the truss rod cover, and it may also be because I want to tweak that before I do any fret leveling. So the idea with this, as always, is to fit the nut of choice, which means knocking this one out, fit the nut of choice, then set the whole guitar up using the existing strings, and then doing the fret leveling. Now this one is seated quite a little bit down inside in a little shelf, so I'm just going to move you, because this always happens, I get too close up. Too close up. So it's got a little bit of come on. Yeah, I want to tap it out, but it depends on how heavily it's been glued. I don't want to break the veneer off the front of the headstock, which is a risk. So I'm going to get me a screwdriver and just tap this. Now if it doesn't want to play and doesn't come away, then we may have to just cut it off to be on the safe side. Let's support that fraction better. A bit bouncy, but it'll do. Now unfortunately that doesn't want to do any movement, so I'm going to cut it off. It seems a bit of an extreme, but we don't really mind because we're not bothered about the about the remnants of the nut. We just want it off without damaging the headstock finish. So once we, not just yet, but once we've done the leveling and changing the nut and so on, then I'll take care of the, or try and find a better set of posts for the bridge. We don't know. Now these strings are already, I've kind of undone them once and tightened them up. Why did I do that? I did something. What did I do? Oh, that's right. I took the bridge off and had a look at it at home and changed the action there to see how it would play while I was just trialing it out basically for an hour or two. So they're already off and on a couple of times. If I break any of these, then I do have some courtesy of Michael. Actually, I've got a couple of Harley Benton string sets I can use. Right, so like I said, for some people it may seem a bit extreme to use this technique. However, to me it isn't, because it's the way I know that I can get the old plastic nut out of the game without running the risk of any damage. Now what I'm doing here is I'm going to probably use this clip-on cutter, so it's a bit of a bigger cutter than the little metal disc that diamond coated disc I often use. So obviously being plastic, it's going to make a mess. Ready, go! And I will actually put a mask on for this. I don't want to breathe in all that nasty stuff. So I'm also putting the microphone down there out the way while I do this, because I can't put it on and wear the mask. So, bear with me. Okay, better. Hello there. Let's do a little bit of crunching, see where we go. Yeah, looks like it's had quite a bit of glue shoved on it in the past. Okay, cut lower still. Break this off. There we go. Yeah, glued on. Well and truly glued. Truly glued. See if we can cut some of this off. Fine. Let's get a finer blade or something. Okay, I'll take the mask off in a minute. Fine. Right, where are we? Oh yes, microphone. Back on, sorry about this. So you can see that was pretty well stuck, and also stuck to the face of the end of the headstock. So okay, it's not unusual, that's quite common, but we've got it out without any damage to the surrounding areas or the slot. And so what I can do is use a blade now to just try and gently scrape away any residual glue, and of course also scrape across the flat surface as well. So the plan obviously will be to replace and refit with this, and it's a pretty good fit right from the get. It's a tiny bit wider, but we'll sand that down. The other thing, if you have any unevenness, you get one of these little Hosco, what do they call them? You know, sanding things, nut slot files. That's probably what it is. Nut shelf files, nut slot files. Anyway, don't want to go too mad with it, but it just allows me to take off any excess material that's in the way, and then we can get another little brush. Now, I think I know that I want to just lower or sand the front of this nut down a bit. So I've got me some, this is a bit of a dirty old block at the moment now, so I'm just going to take some of the face off, because the printed thing anyway, the printed base has a slight kind of proud bit and has some marks from the printing process, so it's always good to just lightly sand that back to get a total flush finish between these two faces, the nut and the base, because then it will sit up against the end of the fingerboard nicely. So a little bit of heavy grit and then a bit of fine grit to get it all nicely fitted, so I can feel it's lovely and smooth. That will probably now end up with it fitting beautifully in there. That is almost a perfect fit. That's what I do like these for. What do they call them? Oh yeah, Epiphones. I do like them. They take the adjustable nut perfectly. So I don't even have to stick it down for now. I can just put it in place and we can stick it later when everything's done. Now, the thing I have to be sure of when I do this, and I know from experience, is that I have to gauge that where it sits at the moment, it's high or low enough. It needs to be low enough so the strings sit on the first fret with the nut fully in. So as it happens, I can see that it does. So what I'm going to do now is just refit these strings. Got quite a bit of leftover excess, but that's okay. And I'm just going to place them very lightly now on the thingy in the nut slots. And we'll get all of these on, and we'll tighten the middle two first so that they press the adjustable nut down in place so it can't go off sideways somewhere. So I won't put any load on it till then. So right, that's just gently placed on. Now I can actually see right now that may well be fractionally too high, in which case I either may be better starting out with a different piece, or I may have to sand it down. We want the strings to touch the so let me just see. Let's take a short stop one just in case. While we've got these here, we can use it as a simple guide. So let's pull that out. Let us separate out this, if I can, easily with a twist. There we go, like a nut opening up. Let's try now this one will also need a little bit of sanding on the front edge to get it flush. So there we have our nut, and this one's sitting a little bit lower from the outset. So let's do the sanding on that. Only need a tiny bit really. Let's make sure one thing is true, that these are dialed right up and out, that they're not sticking in at all. Okay, so I think this will be good. This one is a starter. So it just ends up being a fairly shallow nut slot. Okay, so that's just flattening it off again in flush with the nut face, or the adjustable part, that's actually still fractionally wide, so I'll do the other side now, just a tiny bit. Again, smooth that off. It doesn't have to be smooth, this back side of the whole thing, but it doesn't hurt if it is. And then that should just drop in like so. Now that's that's a fraction too low, probably, so we're somewhere in between these two, but given that that's where it is, I could probably lift this up and out to the correct height right there by doing just so. Let's start off with these. It's wound out. Just see if it will work the way we want. Okay, let's try that. If not, I'll go back to the taller one and we'll just cut it down, or sand it down, I should say. So let's get all the strings on first to make this a bit easier. Come on. The trouble is working with old strings, they never do what you want them to, or sort of ready stretched strings. But I should just be grateful that they, so long as they actually play, that's the main thing. Okay, so this is still quite low. Let's see if we can raise it a bit more to its adjustable height. Is good. That's not bad actually. I think we should be alright. We'll do the other one to the same sort of height. It's quite high, but it's perfectly workable. So, bear with me while I try and fit these very bent bits of wire all the way through and hook them, if I can, around the post. This adjustable nut thing, the way this, first the combination of this tusk plus the slanted slots seems to do a brilliant tuning job. It's why I use them, because ever since I discovered them, they were actually made for a completely different purpose, but as soon as I discovered them I couldn't stop using them because they did exactly what I needed. Let's try and get this, and that's the wrong way round, Sam. I'm trying to get something on here, but it's insisting on winding its way out. Right, just go on there. Just for now, please. Okay. Yeah, I think this will do pretty nicely. Then we'll have to make an adjustment on the action as well, just to make sure we've got everything right, and of course the relief. And then once that's all good, we'll be ready to paint up the frets. I probably should have done that already before tightening up any strings, but it's not a big deal. Come on through there, you curly bit of string. Up in the air. Don't want you scratching your way around the headstock. Okay, so all there and not very tightened up yet. That height looks about good for that. Right, let's have a look at the height here. Let's put the middle ones underload. Yeah, let's tune them all up. We might as well okay, so they're all up playing, a little bit low on this end, still fraction low. If I'm not happy with it, I'll go back to the higher one and go, sand it down from the bass, but that's okay for now. Now what we want to do is set the last fret action. We're at normal pitch. Let me zoom out so you can see. I've actually got that stupid bone dust all over my specs. So No wonder the world's looking a bit grey. That might be better. Oh yes. Right, so we're under load. Let's check what the relief is doing. Actually, it's quite a lot. Indeed, that's a lot. Let's take out some of that, and that will quite substantially change how the guitar feels to play. So there's too much in there. So you can see that, I hope you can see, I'm going to insert the thingy and I'm going to tighten it clockwise. Now it's about 225 degree turns, fairly stiff, but it's taken the gap down to a smaller gap. It's still actually quite large for an electric guitar, and I'm going to go for a shorter, come on, out of there, plastic from the nut. Yeah, it's quite stiff, this, but it should work well with very little relief. Okay, I'll call that quits. This will be a bit lower now, so we have to. I'll dial it up for now, but I think we might end up going for the taller bass and sanding it down a bit. It's all good now. I mean, that works perfectly well. Okay, so now we're looking at the action at the far end, and we've got barely 1.2. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab a large screwdriver, and I'm going to, it won't fit, a large screwdriver, and I'm going to just counterclockwise turn this a little bit. I want 1.5 at the last fret. That's it, and then I want 1.2 there, and that's a bit low still. I mean, it wasn't low, it was higher when I got it from Jan, but I've tweaked it without measuring it at home, so this is a fine tune, if you like. Tiny bit more. There's no point going for ultra low. Now obviously it'll change a bit if and when we take the bridge off and add some different post things. Okay, so I'm getting near doing the work, the fret leveling part of this, so while I'm at it, why don't I just mark up the frets while I can. So I'm just going to paint them over. Don't paint the frets over. Don't paint the frets, baby. Don't paint the frets over. Our ship is like our love is like a ship on the ocean. Da 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 da. Forgot the words. Love and devotion, of course, rhymes with ocean, devotion. I must admit, there were some good disco songs. I hated most of them at the time. I'm ashamed to say, because some of them now they are recognisably classic, but at the time in the sort of late 70s, I really hated the sound of it. And I think probably for my kind of kid, it was because it was a music for people who could dance, and being a sort of pasty white kid sort of thing, self-conscious pasty white, untalented, unathletic white kid. It just was. There was no way in God's earth you were going to get me in a disco on the dance floor. It just wouldn't happen. So yeah, it was music that didn't seem to have a point. If you didn't dance to it, what's the point? But secretly, like all kids who didn't dance, you secretly wished you could. Okay, so reality check. We've got new nut, good first fret action, which we might change later. we've got the last fret action that we want, 1.5 across to 1.2. We've got the relief we want, which is less than there was, but still plenty enough. So that's in a good spot. So now the time has come to level the frets. Now I know it needs leveling, so I don't have to demonstrate it right now because I know it needs it, because when I set the action to that level, it had quite a bit of double notes going off, so it does require it. But here we go. Yeah, disco. So the whole of my my sort of secondary school, there was either disco, reggae, or punk. It was like a really limited cafe with a kind of almost non-existent choice. And I think people seem to just obviously they kind of split themselves off into one of those groups. And I think it was pretty uncool to be a kind of disco fan in our school. So I think our school broke down into, and actually there's another type. There was disco, punks, reggae, or heavy rock. I forgot that one. So we got a really low spot right here, and we got a low spot up here as well. It's interesting. This one's not touched at all. Now obviously I don't need to do more than I need to do, so I'm only going to level it as much as is required for all the notes to play the way I want them to play. That's the main. See that low one there, that was where I was getting double notes the other day, so I'll just show it to you. What, 12, 13, 14, 15th fret. So we've got one low there. Can you see it's not even been touched by the what's it paper, the sort of sandpaper. And we've got one up here on the 15th, and that one next to it, 16th, is very high. So we've got low, very high, low, and in fact these are probably not that low, but that's actually very high. So that was causing the double notes, but the fact that this is low compounds it. So we have to do a bit more work there to get that sort of sorted out. Yes, so I'm probably going to run out of categories. So we had, what did we have? We had disco, hardly any at my school if I recall. There was definitely punks. There weren't too many sort of just reggae heads actually, and that's because in my school in Coventry at the time there were very few Afro-Caribbean kids. They were all sort of white Irish descent, or white Irish, or occasionally English. But you know, it was a very white-coloured place. But around town in Coventry, when I was in my sort of musical youth, I wasn't in musical youth, but you know what I mean. It was you know, there were lots of people into reggae, and there were in other parts of Coventry, not at my. I think it was a reason that there weren't black kids at my school is because it was just by chance, it was a Roman Catholic school. Not that I was, never been religious, but my dad taught there, so I think he kind of had to pretend we were, or something like that, and that itself was the source of many a kind of neurosis and childhood crisis about being in a religious school when you're not, and the way the religious people can treat you. But anyway, but because it was Roman Catholic, there weren't that many black Roman Catholic families, I think. Could be wrong, but in Coventry, but certainly not around that neighbourhood anyway. So it's mostly Irish, English, and Polish people, of course. That was the other Roman Catholic, fairly sizable minority of Polish people. And most of the Polish kids that I knew were heavily into punk, because it was sort of around the time that Poland was just emerging from the Iron Curtain, the Solidarity movement and all of that stuff. And I think the Polish kids, almost more than anyone else, needed punk, you know, as a sort of a way to break out from greyness of their family, their parents' sort of Soviet, ex-Soviet generation, because the people who the families I knew, they were very good people, but they were evidently sort of brought up in the behind the Iron Curtain. Yay! Good. Got all the bends out. Oh, let's check the G notes. So we had, not so much reggae. I think we were mainly punk, heavy rock, and punk, heavy rock, and no disco, that's for sure. So it was a kind of punk and heavy rock thing. You sort of, heavy rock, I suppose I mean the people who were into Led Zeppelin, Rainbow and stuff like that. Heavy rock, not metal so much. But that's where you seem to fall. There was a very small contingent of Beatle fanatics, which probably included me and a couple of other people. But that was in a way so out of, it was so uncurrent. It was a bit like being a Chopin fan, long dead, not serious, or not a serious contender for current music scene. I think there was when we got out and about, we did get exposed in the sort of pubs and clubs to a fair amount of reggae and dubs sort of stuff. And of course then ska, which is a very particular movement, I suppose, came out just as I was in my sixth form, I guess. When I say sixth form, I don't mean studying in my sixth form to do anything productive. What I mean is drinking vodka and sort of being oblivious to anything to do with learning. I discovered drinking, me and a couple of pals, and we did our best to be as drunk as we could at most lessons. Not a great start in life, but so we did. But ska was a real blast, sort of fresh air, coming out of Coventry, mainly with the specials. And we were very conscious. We knew it was from our town. You just kind of got that special feeling. This was our city that was producing this, amongst its sort of concrete hellness. So around the time I was in that sixth form, I think it was down to the three things. It was punk, it was ska, or it was the sort of rock dinosaurs of old, with a few sort of freaky Beatle obsessives tucked away for good measure. Of course, it wasn't that far in real time. It was not that far since the end of the Beatles anyway, so 70, I was discovering the Beatles in about 78. So, only really 8 years after the breakup, and maybe 11 years after Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, I was discovering them, which is not that long ago. I mean, it's not that big a gap, is what I mean. Wow, nice, low as anything. Okay, so the fun part now is let us remove the strings. If you're taking them off the guitar, Jan, with an adjustable tusk nut on it, that middle bit can come out, so let off the outside strings inwards, so that you end up with the two center ones holding the nut in place until you slack them off, and that will just stop it from flinging off in one direction. And once it's undone, then you can move it. I shall see whether I think it needs replacing. That's sitting pretty tall, pretty high up. We'll go with the other one, and I'll just take some off the bottom to reduce it, which is what I normally do. I thought I'd get away with not doing it. Anyway, these strings have served their purpose, so off they come. I actually think they're a hybrid set, and I don't actually have any hybrid sets, so I'm going to fit 10s for this time round, and of course you can switch back to this hybrid gauge at a later date. Okay, so what I'm interested in now is let's get all these unhooked from here, which is easier said than done. The thing I don't like about this saddle as well, bridge, sorry, is that it's got Epiphone written on it, but it's already worn slots into both the compensated apexes and not just that, but also around the back. I'll show you, in fact I'll give you a look, and that's fixed the strings in slightly the wrong place. So let me just give you a quick close-up view of this. Right, so you can see a little bit of notching in several different places on there, so it kind of wanders, but then you can see it's notched the back edge as well, which you don't have any choice about. So again, well, it's not a brilliant design having the strings go around that at almost 90 degrees, but that's what you get for an inexpensive design. Now what I want is something that's going to fit better. Oh my god, this post is coming right out. And that one too. Now this one's supposed to have some wire in there. Oh, you can just about see it. What I'm going to do is what am I going to do? I could stick them down. Problem with that is that it's going to mean leaving this overnight for the things to set, resin I should say. If I glue, it's going to rise up to its own choice of height, but I think we don't really want these things coming up anymore. Now when you fix them in place with a bit of glue or resin or something like that, what you get is you just have to be careful that you can you still make metal contact between your... Oh, sorry, I don't know why I've left you looking wide over there. What am I doing? You have to make sure that you can still have metal touching metal on this grounding thing here. And actually the funny part of that is that this grounding thing, the way this is quite loose, I'm not even sure that would be touching anyway, unless we put some extra something in there. So that comes through there. We could put a bit of extra tin foil in there. Anyway, so I guess the first thing I want to do is to go through my little box of spares. I've probably got more elsewhere as well. So we got the problem is, as I mentioned before, I don't know if you can see, yeah. Problem is this. Let's take it off. You can see the amount of slop here, and that sticks up, and then of course if they also lean, then the whole thing leans. Now we may have a situation where a different kind, let's make sure we know which is which, a different kind, right, might fit better. Now this one is stiff, but this is a fraction too big to fit. This fits there, and it's a similar amount of looseness. Sometimes two of the same design have different tolerances, and suddenly they work. But it's just a matter of trying, and if you're lucky, you get lucky. If you don't, you don't. So the problem is, it ends up, typically I end up finding one that works is something like a black one that And again, that's a bit too narrow. That one's nearly tight enough, but it's a bit gnarled. There's a nice gold one. Again, it's slightly too narrow. Rattle, rattle. May not be the case that we find one that's too narrow at all. So you may just have to live with it. Live with it. Loads of rattle. Whoops. Not fitting at all. See, there's at least a millimetre of slack, which you really don't want. That's tighter. We'll put that one there as a possible. Now let's find another one for the other end. Nope. What's that? A square one. It's a square one. Square top one. Of course, if I don't find another square top one, we're doomed anyway. And that's square topped, but it's not. Still not wide enough for this end. And that's no good. Then we find a pair, or we either find a pair. See, that's good. That would work, but it's gold. Doesn't help anyone much, is it? That's lovely and tight. Oh, that's perfect. Do we care? We could wash that gold off completely. Look at that. Snug as a bug. I'm going to do that. I don't care. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and buff the gold off that. I mean, it's not an untoward colour anyway for this guitar, but it takes out so much of the slack that will stop it tilting over, first and foremost. Yoo-hoo! Now, the other problem we've got is that these pesky things are too loose, and the question is, do we have any others that start out being bigger by default? No, that's even looser. Now, my luck, I've probably got some gold ones that'll do it, but that's not what we want. That's the right one. That's too loose. Blimey, that's way too loose. Thanks, Epiphone. I think that's probably a vein something or other. Knowing my luck, the gold ones would probably fit. Oh yeah, look at that, a perfect fit. Damn it. You got any other gold ones kicking around here? Well, of course not. Oh yeah, there's the second one. Look at that, those fit. That would do away with the rattle and the rock. Well, it's a funny old setup. What we could really do with the gold bridge altogether. No, that's taking it a bit too far. So I think that form and function is most important here. So I can glue in the existing ones, but that won't be as snug as these. All I'd need to do here is take off the gold off the front of those, and I think they'll work. So let's do that so that we have the snuggest possible fitting thing, and that way we won't have to use glue, which means it can always be reversed or replaced or whatever. If I use glue, then we're making it, removal of that a lot less likely. I'm going to clean my hands in a minute. So that, oh no, I've done that thing. I knew I'd do it. I've put one of these away. Oh God, that's that one, thankfully. Oh, the one on the top. See, they don't look like it, but it will fit like it. We'll call it that. Right. I'm going to double check because I don't want to be wrong. That's the problem with having so many spares. Too many choices. That's not right, that's right. Okay, so of all of these, that one actually looks like the pair, the matching pair. But that one's tightish. That one's too loose. That one, actually that wouldn't be a bad fit. So what's this one like? Ooh, actually that's not a bad fit either. I think that one's been, that would save us a bit of time and effort. What do you reckon? That's the original pair. There's some replacements. Now we only have to take off the brush off the silver from these. Shall I try it with a... Let's try it with a Dremel and a thingy brush. So this is a bit of a detour, a non-standard detour, but I'm just trying to make this work better than it currently does, so that it doesn't lean. I pointed the lean out to Jan when we sort of went through the guitar, but it's sort of limitations of crappy hardware. Come on then, away you go. Let's have all the speed. It's spinning the cloth around, the mop around a little bit. But it's working. I might put a different one on that might... Why isn't that one staying put? Maybe it will. Around the edges. Spin, damn you! Let's just have a look. Yeah, I mean, it's not very gold, is it? You'd hardly notice. It looks perfect. Let's live with that, shall we? Well, yeah. And we have to make sure that the threads are right. Yeah, oh, yes, just about. This doesn't quite like it. Oh no, please. It does like it, but it's trying to spin round a bit. Not so bad. Where's my screwdriver? Mostly I don't want that footing to spin round. Okay, so these are gold, but actually they suit the TV yellow thing quite well. And then when we get this back in here, we got, oh, beautiful, absolutely no rock and roll at all. So those are going back to Jan in a bag. These are going back in here, out of the way, and we can get on with the show. Come on, thank you. Small bag. That's a good fix. Standing up straight now, which will change the action, but we'll have to dial it in anyway. Okay, let's get back to where we once belonged. Right. Sorry, terrible camera work as always. Okay, so what have I done? Oh yes, I've done the leveling. Now we've got a perfectly solid bridge. Now we're going to mark up all the frets again, and this time next we're going to crown them ready for sanding and polishing, which I'll do in a short while. Will I switch off? Sometimes I switch off, but sometimes it's just easier to keep it running. So I want my StewMac fret crowning file. I want, this is filthy, it's going in the bin after this session. So now I'm going to use my medium edge for these frets, and I'm going to recrown the frets. So where I've flattened them slightly in leveling, this helps to round them back off without lowering or adjusting the height any further. It's working very nicely. They aren't very tall frets to begin with, so you know, we didn't want to be doing too much leveling anyway. There were a couple of very low spots and one high spot, and those things combined together to create a real issue when trying to play So you have to be quite persistent to get rid of that. It can be, when the frets are fairly low, it can be quite difficult to sometimes leave a little groove from this tool, but there's nothing you can do about it, because you have to lean over to rotate or roll the tool from one side to another to get to the top of the fret. So today Jeff came and picked up his I called it 1978. I think it's I called it 1977, but I think it's 1976 American Fender Strat, and just a lovely sounding thing that was too. So it made me really want to get a set of good quality Fender single coils for one of my Strats. Actually, having said that, I did kind of listen closely to the sort of configuration I'd got on my red parts caster Strat, and actually it was a lot better sounding than I'd remembered. I sort of had been telling myself that it's still not that Fender single coil magic, and sort of telling myself that I would treat myself one day to a set of Fender Fat 50s or something, and actually it's a pretty good sounding guitar, so you don't really need to do that. But you know how it is with guitars, you keep think about it too long, look at it too many times, and you end up wanting to change stuff on it. I went out rehearsing yesterday with this cover band in my local town, Tavistock, and it was very enjoyable too. Two of the members are customers. In fact, three of them have been customers of mine at one point, or kind of brought guitars to me. But so on the guitar we've got Stuart, who is a local guy in Tavistock and been a friend and a customer for a couple of years now, and so he's on guitar and I'm on guitar, and we've got Chris on bass, who brought his bass for a setup, so he's another customer, but I guess he wasn't before, but yeah, and then we've got Gary singing, who I played with I guess 5 years ago. I played with him in another band, similar sorts of songs and everything, and it was great. It's like coming home sort of thing, you know, when you play with somebody you know anyway. And I think the mixture right now is really perfect for me. It's a mixture of kind of serious but not too overwhelmingly onerous, you know, as far as demands go. And I think it works. I think it makes us, I don't know, we treat it seriously, but I think it also just makes it fun, which is, it's got to be. We're at the moment, this is the second time we got together, so it's been about a month between get-togethers, which, you know, a lot of people would think that's not enough for getting good as a covers band, and that's true enough, but it's not a bad start out. And I think rather than start with a pace that everybody ends up running from because they can't really keep it, I think it's better to start with a slower pace, see how that goes and feels, and then when people feel that there's something in it for them that they want to, it's worth keeping or fighting for, then, you know, I imagine that we might up the ante and do a couple of months. But anyway, good fun. And I was pleased, because after this bloody shingles infection, I wasn't sure that I'd have the energy to play for 3 hours, but I think we did it. It was pretty much 3 hours. I sat down a lot of the time, so I was the kind of old-fashioned studio, big band studio muso, session muso, sitting down, but it wasn't a bad way to do it. Of course, one of the guys recorded everything we did, and then made the mistake of sending the videos the next day. Of course, it's like, oh, did we really sound like that? And actually it isn't that bad, but I don't know about you guys, but I'm extremely self-critical when it, or quite self-critical when it comes to hearing back what we played. And I know for a fact that in the moment when people are having drinks and in a party atmosphere, they, you know, they can forgive all kinds of looseness and not very goodness, but when you're listening to it in the cold light of day, not in that environment, it can sound a bit rough, but it's not bad for a second get together, so I don't think we should feel bad about it. Anyway, so next one, 2nd of November, and last night I took my PRS style build. It's always great. I always feel good playing my own guitars, and that guitar has, it's the first neck, I think, well, second neck, but nearly almost equal first neck that I ever made from scratch. And I actually made it, I made the whole guitar as a sort of test running up to doing a full build for a customer. And I thought, oh, since I haven't done a neck from scratch, I think I ought to. So I set about building this PRS style thing, and I like this. I wanted to test out a finish as well at the time, so I kind of made it not only a test of building the neck, I also decided to make it a finish test as well, which I did, and both things work really well. And the neck's just become actually one of my favourite. I just love it the way it feels. So to get a neck to build a neck yourself, including all the mistakes, to get one that you really like playing, is I think a really good outcome. And then, as it happened, the neck I made for the commission guitar for Nick in the States, or in Arizona, I actually ended up doing that one first in the end, while the PRS one sort of sat on the shelf. Just the way it worked. I guess I'd got confident and went ahead and did it, and that turned out to be, Nick was in awe of the neck. He loved it, and it, you know, to tell him that it was the first neck I ever made from scratch was quite, I don't know what the word is, but it was fun. Anyway, so yeah, I took that, and that guitar actually had it was kitted out with 8-gauge strings on it, and it has the Rail Hammer Hyper Vintage humbucker set on it, which I've always found does everything really well, except maybe a single coil sound, but that's what you'd expect on a guitar that's got 2 humbuckers on it. And in terms of sounds, I took my Katana 100 amp and basically switched it on and left it on its default, where it comes on the clean channel, left it on there, and only went between the presets I had thrown together isn't the right word, but I'd gone through this Boss, forget the number of it now, Boss multi-effects thing that Adam gave me, and I'd gone through that and picked out, I think, 4 banks of, or four groupings of maybe 10 a time sounds. So there's cleans, there's crunchies, there's distortion, something like that, and basically I'd just gone and picked out a cluster of things that seemed to work and put them in a grouping, and I managed to sort of get where I wanted to go pretty quickly between all of those last night, although it's far from ideal, and you know, with more time and work I could certainly pick out the right presets for the songs that we're doing. And I had 1 or 2 that I'd heard and thought, that sounds right for this song, and I'd as I copied them, I'd labelled them or named them the song name, so I could sort of go to them and it's quite satisfying that we went to do Dakota by Stereophonics, and I went to the sound I thought in my head, oh, that sounds like it would work for that, and Stuart was kind of, wow, love that tone, perfect tone, so I got that bit right. Yeah, so just, I think the principle for me worked out, which was to be able to just grab the sounds and have them work well enough that I didn't need to do any adjustments on the amp. That's what I'm trying to avoid, or was trying to avoid doing. Okay, so the plan now is to sand and polish out these frets, and as I'm doing it I'm sort of putting a few bits and pieces away, but to sand and polish out the frets, and after that we'll restring and be nearly done. And being a Friday night, I shall go home for a nice cup of tea. Friday nights don't mean anything when you're old, as I am. Right, bits and pieces. So I won't wash my hands off yet, because I'm now going to go into very thingy mode. What's the word I'm looking for? Lots of dust mode again. So my first thing is a very boring camera, I know, I'm very sorry. So here we go, polish out. It's going to go across the frets the first time round with the 600. Why is this 600? This is not supposed to be 600, it's supposed to be 400. That's the wrong way around. I knew that was somewhat wrong. Let's do that. 400, 400. Yes, so yeah, it was good fun anyway. I'm glad to be back playing, even if it's low, low ambition. It's not like writing songs, or there's no big future in doing it. There's no target, no place we have to get to. The only place we'd want to get to is being good enough to keep a crowd happy on an outdoor summer gig or something, and people have a good time and have danced and sung a bit. That's all. If I can do that, that would be that's all I'm doing it for. And to be able to enjoy it and play well enough with each other that we don't have to second guess. We kind of know each other well enough by that time to just enjoy the playing part, which I know we can get to, because this last time Gary and I played together, we got close. We got to that place after about a year of playing together, and it was great. You could really notice it change when suddenly we didn't have to think about the songs. We could just do them and be much more present in the doing of them, and be more musically kind of sensitive to each other, which means you can kind of go off piste and have a bit of fun at times. So that's the only ambition there is for me, and I don't think it's not undoable at all. Right, now let's get on with the 400s. So this is where it just gets noisy and blur. I think the replacement posts, although non-standard, as in they're not the right colour technically, I do think that they will prove to be a better solution. So it doesn't move, it doesn't tilt forward, and also looking at the posts as well, they're going to stay put. Ow! Not careful. Right. So you can understand why often I switch the camera off at this point and go and listen to some YouTube or watch some YouTube in the background, because this is repetitive and noisy. I've lost a little furry thing off the end of my mic. Oh well. What are we on now? 1000 grit. I'm going to take the cellophane is now kind of peeling back off that plate, so I'm going to remove it because it's just untidy now. See what I'm doing? My grip is too weak. I forgot to turn off the, oh God, I forgot to turn off the things. Never mind. Probably got all kinds of interference now going. Oh well. There's something in my armoury that causes interference. I think it's one of the two phones, but I'm never sure which one. I think this one sort of isolates itself so that it doesn't pick up, but I think the mic picks up the other phone or something like that, one way or another, and it kind of creates these horrible blips. But you'll know if it's done that by now, because I'll have nicked the audio from there and the video from there, and there'll be all kinds of sonic changes. Not that it really matters too much, but it just makes editing or compiling these videos a bit more of a pain for me. So now we're down, got to 1500 with the papers, and now we're going to go to the micro mesh sheets. I think this set is about done as well, so as I throw away this mat, I think I'll probably throw away the micro mesh set too. And they're not blasted cheap. They're about 20 quid for a 9-piece set, which is nuts. They used to be half that, and they were bigger as well, so they've done shrinkflation as well as inflation. It's just unfair. Anyway, so once I've done this, I will clean the fingerboard, oil it, clean up the guitar, and then we'll be ready to put the strings back on and set up the action. We'll stretch the strings out, and then I was going to say intonate. We'll check the intonation, but the only adjustment we've got is backwards movement of the bridge, which is actually, to be fair, good enough. People don't like it. They think it's an inadequate system, but actually it's perfectly good. You've got the preset stagger is absolutely correct for any 6-string guitar with 3-plane and 3 wound. That's perfectly set. About 1 millimeter's difference maximum between each saddle apex. They've built that into there, and then the only other issue is a gross sort of backwards and forwards movement, which you can do with these adjusters on the back. If it's outside of the range, or you can't get it intonated for some reason, it'll be because the bridge is incorrectly placed, full stop. But the actual bridge itself is a perfectly good design. Just sloppy in the engineering, and a combination of the sort of posts coming out and the slop in the mating of the two pieces results in that rotation, which is crap. But if they made them a little bit more accurately, then we wouldn't have that problem. But I think they build the slack so that, to avoid not being able to fit it at all, I think they the reasoning will be that if it's as close as I would like, then a certain number every batch would be, and you'd be unable to make them together, which may be true, but we pay the price then of having too much play in the joint, if you like. Right then, we're just about at the end of this. 12,000 grit final going over. Very good. So we will remove, well, first of all we'll brush off any obvious surface grime, might as well. Then we'll take up the green frog tape, and up comes the cellophane, I'm afraid, but that's how it's going to be. It's kind of impossible to protect everything and leave that cellophane on anyway, but it's like keeping the, you don't want to keep the plastic on your car seats forever, do you? You don't want to be that person. Sort of the thing Alan Partridge would do. So, just going to unhook all of these little strips of thingy. People have kindly suggested many times over ways of putting strips of paper down first so you can tear them all off in one go and free up all of these. I've tried it and it never worked for me. It broke the paper. And the only reason it did that is because the paper gets damaged when I sand right to the edges. It wears away thin on the edge of the fingerboard. And it's meant to do that, but then it doesn't hold out when you come to pull the paper just cuts through the last bit of holding. The release paper does, I should say. So this is cool. It's a little bit long-winded, but then that's dropped off there. So what do we think? I'll get hold of the other nut base and sand it down a bit and see if we can see if it works a bit better than the other one. The other one works perfectly well, but I'd rather the adjustable insert wasn't sitting quite so high. It does the job, but it just feels a little bit exposed for my likings. But that's okay. Right, that's all of that done. Chuck this away. So what should we do? Oh yeah, let's clean the board, then oil it, and then prepare the other base for the nut. So I'm just going to give this a sort of nice thorough rub down with naphtha. This being a very lovely inoffensive, safe substance to clean guitar finishes with and fingerboards. It does no harm at all, but it is a solvent that cuts grease, so you will get rid of a lot of the old goo from people's fingers and so on, which can be very nice to freshen up a neck, a fingerboard I should say. But then of course when it removes a lot of oil, you also, before you know it, you've removed some of the darkness, this characteristic that you might like in the way your guitar neck looks or your fingerboard looks, because it's old and your finger oils have gone into it and given it its characteristic dark, moody and mysterious look. And then when we clean it up, it suddenly loses some of that. So some people do, some people don't like having it cleaned that way. I think it's nice to do on a guitar where, especially if somebody's bought it from another owner. Not in this case, obviously, but often I'll get a guitar sent from a seller on behalf of the customer who's bought it, and they'll send it to me and I'll set it up before it goes back to them. And of course they haven't played it before, and if they did, it would have the previous owner's DNA. In some cases it's lovely and clean, but you'd be surprised. Some people don't mind sending guitars that, you know, look like they should be, you know, in a laboratory being tested for alien DNA. But that's just the way of guitars. You know, we sweat when we play them, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's the that. Let's get the tool thingy back. Now what I'm going to do, just putting this to one side, I'm going to I put away the thing that was doing the things. This is one of those. That's probably the right one. This goes with the guitar. I should remember that. So I'm going to dial these back out, and I'm going to replace this in number 5. I don't know why it's a number 5, but it is. And we're going to go back to this one again. Whoops, go the correct way around, because we've already sanded the face of that. So that's the two together. So what I'm now going to do is I'm now going to sand away. I probably need a bigger sanding board. A moment. Noise, bang, crash, wallop. I'm going to sand away the heartache, sand away the tears, I'm going to sand away the base of this using, as much as possible, this rough 80 grit. It's a bit probably in need of a renewal as well, but I'm just cutting away. So what I want is to, when this fits in, tidy it up, front and back edge. It gets a bit grubby while you sand and stuff, but I think that's got to be good, you know. I don't think it needs any less. Let me just check. This is usually the way I gauge it. Put that on there, and that sits on there. That's about right. I'll take a tiny bit more off, but we are not far off. I'm sure my eyeballs are telling me that that's going to be right. I'll just do a tiny bit more sort of clean up on there, front and back. It's got to be right. That's almost flat. Yeah, come on, baby. Right, I think I know that's right. That's right. Now the problem is I don't have any glue. I have to take one of these from the pot of fresh glue department. I'm going to stick this on. That's how confident I am. But I'm going to make sure. What's the fitting? It's like so. Just get a feel for how it seats before I put any glue on. And I'm going to do as little glue as possible. So a tiny blob on this end and a little blob on this end. Push them out of the way. Get the front to the front. That's correct. Everything's right. Drop that in there and press. Feels good. So while that takes care of itself in the setting department, I also will clean up. Oh no, not clean up. I'm going to add oil to the fingerboard before we put the strings on. And once that's done, once I put oil on, I'm going to wash my hands before handling the strings, because my hands are filthy. The bench is dirty too, but it's okay. It's not as bad as my hands. So put the oil on, we'll leave it soak in while I'm washing my hands, rub it off in a minute. Jolly good. Right, talk amongst yourselves a minute while I wash my hands. Oh no, I'm here with you in the little room with the soap. Messy business, the fret leveling and polishing out, that's for sure. Come on. There we are. I've forgotten, lost track of what the time is. Let me just see. Right, it's getting on. 9:30. Well, I've done two things tonight. I was sneaky. First thing I did was I finished my wonderful green and black grained mutated Pacifica. I finished it, so it's ready to go. Woo-hoo. So what did I say? I'm going to go with a set of 10s for this. And we've got heavy 10s, but no, 1050. Actually, 10. Oh no, wait a minute. 946, 1052s. 1052s. What's this one on top? Tempo 548. We'll use those. What we got here? Regular. Oh, 10 to 46. Right, there we go. We're one missing, so I'm going to have to find one. What's missing? Wouldn't you know? That's the 10, 17, 26. 13's missing. So I've got to find a that's the set I want, but I'm missing a 13. I bet there's one in here. There's 13 and a half. I bet there's one in here. You got 13 for me? Second. Yep, there it is. Right. Cool. So let's start with the base end of things. Let's put that in there, like so. Right. I think that nut looks good. So here we go with the backward fitting. Probably better off just taking them off to do that. 10, sorry, 10, 46, 36, 20 something, 6. Well, I'm going to be eating late this evening, but that's okay. I got lots done, which is quite good. Okay, the 13. Alrighty. And the 10. There we go. Right, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the D string, and I'm going to pull it round up to here, and I'm going to push it through. Now what I will do before I do anything else, go through the hole, that's the D, just hold it down there. Now I'm going to zoom in a little bit and want to sort of show you what I do. And this is useful, Jan, for tuning stability. So the secret of tuning, the key to tuning stability is getting the right nut first, the right slots, and making sure the strings run smoothly through the slots. That's critical, but that's half of it, and the other half is getting rid of the slack in your strings. So we've got the nut sorted out, so now it's the strings' turn. So to put the strings on, what I do is I pull it taut all the way through, and on the adjustable nut, which we know is loose, this section, the bottom base is glued, but the top part can come loose. So to hold it down, we do the D string first, pull back a fret, and then start winding. And as it winds, we hold the held string up, so it goes over the loose one, keeping it still taut, so it doesn't, the bridge doesn't drop off. And then as the loose string comes round, we then press the held string lower, and so it goes under that loose. Sorry, the held string goes under the loose string, and there we've got the loose string flapping about. And we do a snip to get rid of it. with our pliers, our cutters. So that's that one done, and that now will pin down the thingy, the whatchamacallit, the nut. Now just before I tighten it all up and make things harder for myself, I'm just going to check what we're doing with the action down here, and at the moment, whoops, it looks pretty low down, so I'm going to start by adjusting everything upwards to make sure we've got at least the right start action close to where we want to go. And I can do the same also for the nut now, which I want to raise up a little bit, but this time hopefully it won't have to go as high as the previous one. So there we are, we're up on both ends equally. This is now above the last fret there. Probably could come up a tiny bit more, but we shall start with the bass end and see. Now we'll go the G, which is the second of the pair, to lock down the thingy, the nut part. Again, pull it taut, make sure it's on in its rut notch, and then we pull back a fret, hold it down with the thumb, and this time as we wind it, same thing, and I can pick it up and hold it taut like this and make sure the loose one here goes under first time, and as it goes under, keep it all taut and then press downwards so the loose one goes over the top this time, and that's a sort of locking arrangement. In fact, this is going round once more, it's not a problem really. That's fine. Snip it off. So we've now got our two kind of locking ones in place, holding everything together. Now this is where the notches on the bridge don't really make a lot of sense to me, but we'll come back to looking at those at the end. Now we can do the rest in any order we want, but I'll do the spindly left hand ones, the difficult ones first. It's like eating your vegetables first and having your pudding afterwards or something, I don't know. Delayed gratification. Frets worth back, wind on, wrong way, wind on, over the loose one comes round, you can yank it up, makes it easier, pull it taut, keep it all taut, under the loose one, and then let it settle into the notch or the slot in the nut. There you go. Now the adjustable nut has a built-in radius of 12 inches, so it should match most Les Paul type guitars. Occasionally you find with some vintage ones, weird ones, it doesn't, so you end up having to you can end up doing a little bit of adjustment afterwards with nut files, but theoretically if there's one guitar you should expect to be a 12-inch radius, and that would be an Epiphone Les Paul Jnr. Right, there we go. Snip. Now we've got the other two wound strings. Okay. Back one. Over. As it comes round, yank that one up in the air if it makes it easier for you, and then go under. And finally, the low E. All the way through, nice and taut, back 1 fret's worth, over, under. There we go. So those are the strings all fitted in such a way that will equally hold down the adjustable part of the nut without it springing around anywhere. So the thing I want to do next is, let's zoom out a bit now, something like that. So give it all a sort of bit of a pull just to settle everything down. I find things tend to sort of pull on a bit. Okay, so if we go for a tune up, and then we can just check the action first. Something's not right there. Okay, and that's because at this end the bridge is down too low. Now that's one of the things I noticed about this. You end up having to have the treble side of this bridge higher up than the bass side, which is a bit weird. And also these strings don't really want to sit in they don't really comfortably sit in the notches that this bridge has, if they're to be spaced correctly. That's what I'm saying. So I'm undoing this to get some action back into the treble side. Right, tune up again. Hold on a second. The gentleman has to blow his nose. Right, where were we? Okay, so now I'm aiming to get things back roughly in the order they were in. So action's too high there. So we'll dial this in. Little fly, go away. Check again. Still too high, I think. Yep. But it's also standing up nice and straight now. No leaning. That's fantastic. Ooh, bargain. Still a tad too high. But this is also sitting in a funny place. If I would prefer to have a new bridge at this point, ideally, but you know, it's just an expense really. It'll play okay. It's just this thing has historically put some notches on it that aren't helpful. So this treble side has to be up quite a bit higher in order to make it play properly. And I honestly don't know what's caused that, whether it's a slope in the body, but I've noticed it on quite a lot of guitars that you end up with the bass side, sorry, the treble side, or one side of the other, or the other, quite a bit higher. To get the action correct. So that's 1 point nothing, and that's 1.5, so it's still coming up, needing to come up. Yeah, the spacing isn't right on this. It's not ideal. It's not too bad, but it would be much better off to have a brand spanking new bridge with no notches pre-built. Okay, 1.2, 1.6. We're nearly there. Obviously out tune. Checking the first fret height is good. Check the action, check the relief, that's okay, where we left it. That's good. Check the first fret action, all good. Yep. Now what we have to do is the stretching part, make sure this thing stays in tune. So if you remember, I said tuning stability of any guitar comes down to two components, or it's in two halves. Half of it is due to the nut, and the nut, if it's made of the wrong material, plastic, bone even, and if it causes the strings to catch in the slots as they are going through due to friction, then it will hold your strings with an uneven tension either side of the string, and then the strings will kind of hang up in the nut. You won't notice it, but it will put your guitar out of tune very quickly. So we have to get the nut right first, which is why I use Tusk, and the slots are, wherever possible, factory slots. Not always possible, sometimes I have to cut them, but then the second half of the formula, the equation, is getting rid of all the slack in your strings, and that slack, if it's not manually stretched out, will release itself over months and if not years of playing. So you heard, we saw I stretched it out between thumb and forefinger, and it put it out of tune, and that's what we have to do pretty much until it stops going out of tune anymore. And the more you do it, and the less slack is left in this string train from bridge saddle to tuner post, the less slack is in there. Once you've got all of it out, then the guitar, combined with the nut being right, the guitar will then stay and play in tune all the time, and you'll want to get it off the peg constantly. That's the beauty of it. Can't really underestimate it. So it was out of tune, but not as much. So we know we're getting close. So we get it, and we stretch it one more time between thumb and forefingers. I mean, even beyond the nut, it's good to do it. You know, if there's going to be slack caught there, if you can stretch a bit of that out too, that's not bad. But it's really, really important, and it is the difference. The nut and the stretching, those two things together, are the two principal reasons, pretty much the only reasons why a guitar goes out of tune all the time, or seems difficult to tune because it's never quite right. Nothing to do with the tuners, funnily enough. Even the most basic tuners will work perfectly well. That's almost perfectly in tune. A little bit on the low E and the tiny bit on the D, tiny bit on the G. Lovely. Okay. Right. I'm pretty happy with the stretching out business. The last thing we've got to look at now is the intonation. Like I say, it's everything about this bridge is capable of being intonated correctly. It's a little bit harder to do than a Strat style thing. It's individual saddles that have their own intonation adjustment, but this has to move the whole bridge in a chunk, and realistically, to get it to move at all, we have to slack these strings off, make the adjustments, tighten them up, pull out all the slack again, and then check them again. So it's a bit hit and miss. So the first thing we do is we ping the harmonic, and we tune the pinged harmonic to E as it is there. Then we fret it. You see it's very slightly sharp. And we tune the B, So the B is slightly sharp. I'll check the E. I'm going right down to the low E. Which is also slightly sharp. So what that tells me is the whole, when the note, the fretted note is sharp, it means the string length is too short. It means we need to push backwards. So that means I need to slack off the strings to give myself some room. So I'm going to use the thingy to speed up the process, because it's a bit of a ball buster otherwise. Obviously we don't want to be toing and throwing with the strings too much, but we do need to push out the last bit of distance. Now these screws haven't got that much more adjustment room available to them, and we have to hope that when we push this out, this last little adjustment available on here, it does the trick, because quite frankly that's as far as it's going to go. So if we now going to do the D and the G back up, keep on stretching them a little bit. So as you can tell, I got them all up very briefly, vaguely to tune, but we'll stretch the E and the B, tune them up, spot on. Yep, I think we got it. The reason we're getting detuning when I pull the strings now is because, having undone them, you basically build back in slack onto the coils on the posts and so on. So you do have to go through a bit of a stretching out again process, but it's not as much as the first time, thankfully. And also be careful on the thin strings. Happy with that. Ooh, there we go. Well, that was the last bit of available intonation room on the bridge, and had that been already tilting forwards, it is a little bit on the, the soft wood is still trying to lean it forwards, but it's much better than it was. I'll give you a look close up. Far better than it was. What are we on? 149. Look at that. I don't know. Let's have a look and see how well. Yeah, so a little bit lifting off the body there, you can just see, but it's much straighter than it was. And as a result, as you can see, the break angles are adequate all the way across. Even the top E, high E and the B, look, that's about 15 degrees. It's much better than it was. I know, forgive me the slightly rubber-footed dog-eared P90 there. That's just my way of raising it up. It's a couple of P90 rings. I couldn't find any simple spacers available anywhere in the UK. Maybe I was unlucky, but so anyway, I went for those because they do the job pretty well. So having done the intonation now, I'm happy, very happy to put on the thrilled, ecstatic to put on the red shoes and dance the blues. Yeah, put on the truss rod cover and do them up. all good. So a little bit of improvising with the extra parts or the different parts for the bridge, just to straighten that up, and it just shows how much of a difference that little choice with some spare parts can make. And that's the second guitar in a row that I've managed to salvage a problem or put right a problem courtesy of some spare leftover bits that I've got out in the in various parts of the workshop. So it's great having all those little bits, because it means I can do that little fix and not charge any money for it, because I don't need those little bits and they're not worth anything to me. So they don't have any monetary value, they're just useful to have around, and I tend to pick them up and collect them over time. So that's it. One thing I didn't tell you about this guitar, which I thought was quite cute, when I looked under here to change over or to raise it up, what I found was this is a stacked P90. So without realizing it, I think it's hum cutting or hum bucking, which is amazing. So you've got a hum bucking P90, which means of course you can play your Green Day stuff till the cows come home without getting any massive radio frequency interference. Anyway, listen, a slightly non-standard one there, but I hope you enjoyed the little setup on this one. And this is the Epiphone Les Paul Jr. 57 reissue, TV yellow, very bog standard, just perfectly straightforward. You know, how much more guitar do you need? One pickup, one volume, one tone. You probably consider yourself lucky to even get a tone out of it. But yeah, really simple and straightforward, but good sounding little thing and fun to play. There we go. And the good thing about this, by the way, is this hasn't been playing up to scratch, and this has sentimental value for Jan. So I'm very pleased to be able to make it play the way it does. And I'm just going to do my usual thing, is stick on the screw. Now I was going to do a little thing. I could do a little thing. Let me see if I could do a little thing. There is a way, certain kind of way. No, that's another song. I don't want to put a great big sticky thing. Now, I could do a little foam thing to hold the thing in, but just for now I'm going to stick it to there. And this really doesn't need adjusting much, but the idea about the adjustable nut is that you can set it to as little as you can get away with. And for me, with my playing style, I may be able to tolerate it lower than you, or vice versa, but it's there with that adjustability. Okay, thanks for watching. See you soon. Oh, have a great weekend.